Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott, your instructor for the complete ASP.NET course. And what we had been doing is taking a look at this calculator. We're on about our third iteration of it. And one thing that I found was as we were going through here, and I'm just going to run it for you, and it works right now. I should say 4 of the 5 operations in here work. So you'll notice if I put in, for example, 123 and 8. I can add them and it works just fine. I can subtract, works just fine. I can multiply, works fine. I can divide, works fine. I can modulo. That isn't correct. Actually, the result of that is 3. For some reason, when you work with modulo, which is the remainder operator, in C#, at least on occasion, it doesn't work correctly. So, went out and looked and tried to figure out how we could come up with an answer for that. And the answer that I'm going to try that was suggested is this. Every place in here where we've got double, I'm going to change it to decimal. You can see there were several places, several things in there that were changed. Now I'm going to try to run it again and see if that fixes the problem. It may not, but it is supposed to. Alright, so this says no. And I think I know already what the problem with that is. Yeah, there's no convert. I think that's going to be a convert to decimal with a D. There. Try it now. And we'll use the same numbers we used before to make sure we didn't break anything. 123 and 8. Alright. Add works, subtract works, multiply works, divide works, and modulo doesn't work. That was a suggestion that was made. And I just want to show you what I oftentimes do when I run into something that I can't figure out is, start with Google. Alright, and I wrote, I keyed in, can you use modulo with double in C#? And it said here, why is modulus operator not working? This was under Stack Overflow. And the suggestion was that you go back and it says doubles are never exact values. All right, to have exact decimal numbers, use decimal instead. And that's what I just tried to do. Modulus should only be used with integers. The remainder comes from a Euclidean division. With a double, you can have unexpected results, and they recommend that you see this operation right here, or this article that's on modulo from wikipedia.com. So we're going to leave it the way it is, and you'll notice, even though I was using integers, it still didn't like it. Now, what could I do here? Because this leads us to something else, and that is, I'd like to show you this. I'm going to go back now. I'm going to change all of the decimal to int, and I might get an error when I run it again, and that's okay because under that convert function, there you go, convert to int. And it looks like there's not a toInt. Is there a toInteger? No. So we'll have to fix that, but I'd like to show you something. This does lead to something that I think at least is pretty important. So I can do a toInt, but it's got to be a 32, a 64. Let's try toInt 32. Now, there's a good news, bad news about this. All right. First, let me run it again. Always like to run it, especially after I make widespread changes like this, and make sure I didn't break anything. Looks good. 123, and I believe 8 was the other number we used. We can add, we can subtract, we can multiply. Now when we divide, we're going to get something a little bit different. We get 15 because we were attempting to divide an integer by an integer. And by default, the way that a computer works is it divides the integer by the integer, and since they're both integers or whole numbers, it throws away any result. But you'll notice now when we do the modulo, wow, it still is incorrect. So there's still something about that it doesn't like. I'm surprised. I thought for sure that would come out and be correct. But let's do this. Just to show you this. If we want this to work, and we want this to work with our divide, then we can do one of three things. First of all, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come back up, and where we've got the let's see, add, multiply, divide, return diff. Now if you look here, we're going to run into a situation, for lack of better words. I've got here int answer equals 0. All right, and I'm going to have here int other. In fact, I'm not going to use an int. I'm going to use here a double other. Let's not even use let's use a decimal. Other, and we'll set that equal to 0 as well. All right, now answer, answer, answer. This one I'm going to use other with. You'll see why in just a second. All right, it's going to look a little funny until we do this, but now when we return it, we're going to have to return a decimal. All right, so we still have the problem because we're dividing an int by an int, but what we can do here is what's called casting. So I can either do this, which takes the value of n1 and it temporarily converts it to a decimal, divides it by n2, and then returns the result. So I can cast the first number, I can cast the second number, or if I want to, I can cast both numbers. Either one or any of those will work. I like to, if anything, I probably over parenthesize. So I would do it like this. But what I want to show you is after I do that, hopefully I didn't break anything. Always, as I said, always got to check to make sure we didn't break anything. But let's just try 123 and 8. Addition works. Subtraction works. Multiplication works. Now with division, wow, 123 divided by 8 equals 0. It still threw it away. We're going to have to check that in just a minute. Modulo looks just the same. So let's go back. This is one of the trials and tribulations, depending on who you are, what you are. You might enjoy this or really not enjoy this, working with this. All right. So I'm returning a decimal, return decimal, decimal, and it's the return quote. All right. So the divide, that's other, that's fine, but I'm still returning answer at the bottom. So here I have to say return quote. Oops, return other. So now let's take a look at it. Now notice it's saying return other, and the reason it's giving me an error is it says here private int. Okay, so there's a problem with the way that this is currently written. And the problem is I can only return one type of variable, and I want to return both an int and a decimal. Now, are there ways around this? The answer is yes. There's a lot of ways around it. Instead of doing it like this, as we've done it here, I'm going to turn that back into answer. I'm going to remove that return other. All right, and I get the error because right now I said return quote is going to return a decimal. Now it's got to be back to an int. And this will just be n1 divided by n2. Now, one way I could fix that would be, instead of having all these in here where I'm returning it, all right, I just want to show you that what we could do if we wanted to make sure that this works, all right, is we could come in and basically, do an alert or something like that when we're doing this one, just to make sure that it works. But what I'm getting way ahead of myself here. What I want to show you real quickly is the fact that what I did was I came back and I added quite a few comments in here. Now, those comments we've already had. We've already been looking at several of the things that are in there. But notice, always a good idea, always, to create comments as you're writing the program. And in fact, in some ways, some people would look at this if they've been watching the entire series and say, well, Jeff, the way that you're doing this is not exactly correct. In other words, you should be coding a little along with your comments, then testing, then coding a little more, then testing, then coding a little more, then testing. And I'd 100% agree with that. All right. But notice routine called when submit button is clicked. And then I've got the calculate results. This method first takes the values in the top two text boxes and converts their contents to an int. Then it returns the English coefficient. And note this was only done for demo purposes and was not necessary. Next, the call math function is called to call the correct arithmetic method. In other words, return sum, return diff, etc. Finally, the print results method is called. So somebody who reads this program and goes through it and says, why did you do this? What does this mean, etc.? That's the reason that you write comments. You write comments basically for two different sets of people. One is people that people in the future may end up maintaining your program. All right? Because if you don't have comments, they're constantly going to be calling you, emailing you, whatever, to ask you, why did you do this? Why did you do that? The other reason that you do it is occasionally, at least, we all put something in code that we're thinking, wow, this is, I'm going to do this. This is kind of neat. And you put something in there, but you're not sure. You think later, well, I better put some kind of a note in there so I remember later why I did it. And again, before each method, I've got a small comment explaining what's going on. So return sum returns the sum, return diff, return prod, return quote, all right, return modulo. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this particular part of the tape. We're going to come back, and then what we're going to learn next is this big statement that you see right here. We're going to take that big if, else if, else if, else if, else if statement and turn it into what's called a switch statement. So I'll be back with that very shortly.